What does it mean to be English? Does it require you to be born here, to have citizenship here, or to support the English football team? Does it require you to be white? Well, the racial definition of Englishness might be something you assumed was a thing of the past. Now, just look at the English football team, right? Of course, Englishness can't mean whiteness. Otherwise, that team wouldn't work. You might also look at the Tory front bench and think, surely the definition of Englishness can't be a racial one. There clearly are, though, some people on the right who want to bring that racial definition of Englishness back. This is Konstantin Kisin from the Trigonometry podcast debating Fraser Nelson.
I've always said, this is a very unpopular thing, that I'm not English, I will never be English. I don't think Rishi Sunak is English. We're both British, but we're not English.
No, you weren't born here, you were an immigrant.
No, but my son was born here. I don't think my son is English.
Right.
He's born to a Russian
again,
and Ukrainian
that's definition,
immigrant.
right? I would say that Rishi Sunak is as English as Tizer and Y-fronts, right? He is absolutely English. He was born and bred here. And I wouldn't say that the colour of his skin makes him any
He's
less.
a brown Hindu. How is he English?
Because he's born and bred here.
So by being born here, you become English, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's strong from Fraser Nelson, right? He's a former, until very recently, the editor of The Spectator. So this is a debate going on within the right. So sort of the respectable right, the somewhat liberal right, or actually, to be honest, just the mainstream right in general. For a very long time in this country, civic nationalism has been the kind of nationalism we have, right? It's saying you're English if you're born here and you identify as English, right? So it's something about your accent, the language you speak, the culture you have, sort of maybe your sense of humor, for example. And especially, I suppose, because of sport more than anything, this idea, sort of looking at the English football team and saying, well, they're not all English, right? That's usually something that I associate with the past, right? But there is a section on the right who are trying to bring back ethnic nationalism. So you've got civic nationalism, which is based on language, based on culture, based on identification, based on potentially where you're born. Then you've got ethnic nationalism, which is based on your blood. How many sort of generations back can you say that you're from this bit of land? It exists, it's not, there are some countries where ethnic nationalism is probably more prominent than civic nationalism, but not here. And generally, if you're in a multicultural society and you try and bring out ethnic nationalism, there can be some bad consequences, right? That's why it's good. It's a thing of the past. Let's look, though, at what happened next in that debate.
I'm Scottish, right?
Yeah.
Now, are my kids English? I would say they are.
How?
Because they were born here.
They're Scottish?
Nope.
By blood?
No,
right?
They've hardly ever been to Scotland, unfortunately.
So what?
By blood, so give me this. I mean,
my son is born to a Russian and a Ukrainian, right? How on earth is he English?
Because he was born here.
You think that being born in a country makes you of that? So if your children had been born in Japan, would they be Japanese?
If they were born there, look, you get white Caribbean people, for example.
Hold on, just the Japanese example. Would they be Japanese?
If they were born there and lived their life there, then yeah. Look, this all comes down to I think
the imperial identity. I get, and I've said this, right? People should be able to come to this country and they buy into the imperial overarching identities. Exactly. We're all British. That's fine with me. But pretending that my son is English, what? Come on.
It depends if you think English has got an ethnic undertone. Now,
of course it does.
Well, I disagree. And by the way, you might say it's not my country.
Okay, no. What about Japanese people?
I would say Hamza Yusuf, for example, is Scottish.
That facial expression he did, it's like, surely everyone watching us can see that you've just dug yourself a hole. You're saying something ridiculous, right? Of course, Hamza Yusuf isn't Scottish. Like, ask, and I'm gonna show you some statistics in a moment, actually. So I'll hold that one. But you probably know this. You know this from just speaking to people. If you spoke to someone who said Hamza Yusuf is not Scottish, right, there would be some real red flags. And, obviously he was the First Minister of Scotland, but when I think about this myself, he's got a Scottish accent, right? If someone has a Scottish accent, I think they're clearly Scottish, right? And I think that's normal. I think that's what most people think. I will show you in a minute the stats. Before I do that, let's look at the last clip of this exchange.
Look, you might disagree with me. People have different definitions of this. But in my opinion, if you're born in a country, you are of that country. And I can look at my sons of half Scottish, half Slavic blood, right? If you do one of these Ancestry.com tests, they might say that. But in what meaningful sense are they half Czech, really? I mean, they don't know the first thing about Czech Republic. I mean, they know everything about England because they were born here. They cheer for England's football teams now. Took them a while, but they do. So that's the way I see nationality. Now, I know that not everybody does that. Now, again,
most people don't. The overwhelming majority of people don't see nationality in every country in the world.
The overwhelming majority of people don't see nationality like that in every country in the world. Right now, this is where Konstantin Kisin has really messed up, right? Because before, he was just giving his opinion. It was an opinion I disagreed with. He clearly sort of clings to this idea of ethnic nationalism. I think a civic nationalism is much more healthy. It's much more inclusive. I think the idea of blood and soil often leads in fairly dark directions, which is why I think people rightly have a suspicion of ethnic nationalism. But, it's an opinion. I can't say he's factually wrong because he's entitled to that view. But what he said there at the end was just factually wrong, right? He was making a claim that wasn't a matter of opinion. He was saying the majority of people in every country in the world hold his idea of ethnic national identity, and sort of looking at Fraser Nelson like he was stupid for not agreeing with him. Now, that could not have been more wrong. So a 2019 study found that only 10% of British people think ethnicity is a defining feature of English identity. If English people get to define what it means to be English, Konstantin Kisin is therefore on the wrong side of the argument. This is from that Guardian article. Just over 10% of people believe that ethnicity is an important factor in being English, compared to 20% from a 2012 study, according to British Future and the Centre of English Identity and Politics. The biggest change was noted among over 65s, where the importance of whiteness fell from 35% to 16%. The new data could challenge the perception that the 2016 Brexit referendum reflected an increase in xenophobic English identity. The findings suggest that during the time of the Brexit vote, perceptions of English identity were becoming more rather than less ethnically inclusive. Actually, that passage is really interesting in a number of ways because I think it really draws out a division that exists on the right now, because there is part of the right which wants to say, look, we're allowed to have various different opinions about immigration, but this is not about race, right? This is not about ethnicity. People can be English or Scottish regardless of their racial background, right? We don't want to go back to a kind of Enoch Powell, blood and soil type ethnic nationalism, which is obviously going to be extremely dangerous in a country with such a large proportion of ethnic minorities. Maybe in Japan, they do have a more ethnic definition of nationalism. That's fine, right? Maybe people might want to challenge it if they're there, but just because Japan has a more ethnic idea of nationalism, they're a more ethnically homogenous society, doesn't mean we should adopt one. It would be very dangerous if we have that. But going back to this statement, on the right, you've got one group of people who are saying, we can sort of have different opinions about immigration, but racism is wrong. And there is this other part of the right which is saying, like, actually, no, let's have a race war, right? It's really, I don't want to say that Konstantin Kisin is objectively calling for a race war, but he is promoting a type of politics which is to say ethnic identity is very important, right? When it comes to defining who is English, then race is a key factor. And if you want to have a politics where Englishness matters, right? Our national identity is key to sort of how we do politics. To exclude 25% of the population, it's quite a dark thing to do, right? And in a way, I think, I find the facts of the matter here, this is one of those things where you can watch this and think, actually, that guy's got an objectionable opinion, and the public is categorically on the side of, well, not just the left, but liberals and liberal conservatives like Fraser Nelson. But there is a significant minority on the right who really want to take us backwards on this. You see it on Twitter, especially actually quite interestingly, younger conservatives seem to be quite interested now in ethnic nationalism, sort of in reawakening an identity politics of whiteness. Now, potentially, that's, to some degree, a response to what they see on the left as people talking about white privilege all the time, or people talking about abolishing whiteness. I can see how that could be a reaction. Of course, that doesn't excuse it. But this is a direction we really don't want to go down.